Now, staying with the story, let's speak to Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Energy and Electricity, Mmusi Maimane, who's with the political party BOSA. Mr. Maimane, thank you so much for joining us this evening. You just also heard there the Electricity Minister, Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, conceding that these increases are untenable and unaffordable. Take us through the debate this afternoon.
Good evening, and good evening to fellow South Africans. What certainly has emerged is that the granting by Nersa for Eskom to recover an 8 billion rand shortfall over the 2 financial years ago means that, in effect, as it was, that South African citizens will have to pay for that. And paying for it means an increase next year of 36%, and then further in the year thereafter, further other increases. Once you add municipal costs to that, it moves itself to over 40% as an additional cost to electricity. I think it is untenable. The cost of the poverty line in this country already sits at citizens who are earning just over 1,081 rands, and which accumulates itself to 35 rands a day. If you add a 40% surcharge onto that, it means that those citizens will continue to be left behind. And therefore, it became very crucial that actually we need to stabilize, as much as we've done well with the grid, and I credited the minister for doing that. We need to stabilize Eskom finances and make sure that ultimately citizens don't get double taxed. They're not paying for the sins of state capture and the corruption and inefficient financial management that took place at Eskom by paying for that through their tax, but furthermore, also now paying through the increases that are coming up in the medium term. So this was a very crucial debate, as ultimately we want to make sure we safeguard poor South Africans and make sure they can get access to electricity, but also our economy relies on being able to have stable electricity, but not electricity it cannot afford.
I mean, it's quite glaring, the consequences that would be of this proposed increase as well to tariffs. Is there anyone that doesn't agree that it's actually unaffordable?
No, certainly. And I think that the question on the table is, how do we fix for it? Because we can all agree that it is unaffordable. At the core face of it is that Eskom have made the demand. This is also equally so. There will be seeking more increases over the next couple of years. So part of the submission I made is that Eskom are the lead culprit when it comes to deviations of now over 18 billion rands. And much of that is because of overruns in Kusile and Medupi. So much of that is when they actually change the scope of contracts, etc. So if we fix the efficiencies that are sitting in the Eskom's financial management system, I truly believe we can cushion the need for the cost recuperation that has been passed on to consumers. So we all agree that it is untenable. Now the question is, how do we stabilize Eskom finances? Because if we say we're not going to grant an increase or help Eskom stabilize its finances, then we might as well give license for those who say, well, load shedding will continue, etc., to have legitimacy. And I don't think South Africa can afford that. And we shouldn't make this debate one that says, if you don't give them money, then the lights will go off. Let's say, let us stabilize the financial position of Eskom and ensure that we can keep consistent, affordable electricity over the next number of years so that we can grow the economy and ensure that all citizens in this country get their fair share of electricity.
And also we heard the Minister, Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, saying that Nersa is not obliged to make Eskom recover that 8 billion rand in particular. And if so, another way of doing it as well would be to space it out over a period of time. You're saying that it's not as simple as black and white, that if we don't give them the money, if we don't get this increase, then of course that means inevitably we get load shedding back. If you can take us through more of those solutions as well, where we can recover at least the 8 billion rand before we even get to the 18 billion rand.
Yeah, and that's what, when I raised the point about the reliance on deviations to the value of 18 billion rand at Eskom, we've got to ensure that we create a certain level of efficiency so that Eskom, in fact, complies with its own procurement measurements. It ensures that it ultimately passes better and cleaner audits and ensures that actually bulk infrastructure built, such as Kusile and Medupe, don't suffer from these cost overruns that we're seeing. That's on the first, that's dealing with Eskom. Secondly, it's about capacitating municipalities. What is clear is the fact that many municipalities owe Eskom, and their municipalities are also being owed by consumers. So cleaning up the way we collect revenue in the value chain so that consumers pay what is rightfully for them to pay. Municipalities also pay that on to Eskom as a way of stabilizing that. But then the third proposal which we made is how do we ensure that we create better partnerships with independent power producers so that not only are we overly, just over the medium term, reliant on coal, but we can continue to introduce renewable energy, which in certain instances are coming in at a cost less, that will stabilize the cost for consumers over a period of time. If we do those things, then we can ensure that we don't have to face up to this issue of load shedding. We can take that off the table, and we can ensure that ultimately the cost don't run away with us, given the nature of where the cost of energy is going. I think the overall conversation that us South Africans we need to have is that how do we make sure our economy is growing at a rate higher than 1%? Because half of the reason why we're ending up having to run out of money from the state's point of view to be able to shield consumers against such headwinds is because our economy is not growing at a rate that it should be. And part of it is the stability of energy, but more than anything, ensuring that our logistics are working well, that we invest in proper infrastructure, stimulate SMMEs, and ensure that when it's said and done, our economy is growing at the rate that more people can work, afford electricity, and pay for electricity.
Mr. Maimane, to one of your solutions to talk about essentially Eskom being able to function optimally as well, we need to get to that point too. And while we also do commend the Minister for some sort of relief of load shedding over this period of time, historically what we've been able to note is that Eskom hasn't been able to effectively get its ducks in a row, obviously bearing in mind that there are now these progressions and successes that they have under their belt. But when we talk about bailouts from previous years and these kinds of solutions to say that there needs to be effective governance and management at this power utility, but over the years they did just receive bailout after bailout.
Well, it has been historically the case, and the conditions that have been placed on those bailouts need to be maintained. I think that the stability of the entity starts with having a board that has the adequate skills to ensure that there aren't historical practices such as state capture, etc. And I think there's a team there that's working hard. The leadership from the CEO needs and all the way down needs to stabilize itself to ensure that it is not only being able to correct what was happening in the past, but build towards the future. Because Eskom as an entity globally must be one that transitions and implements effectively the Just Energy Transition Plan. But the last issue I'd say is that it's in managing the ecosystem. Because in the ecosystem of Eskom, there are coal suppliers, there are coal agreements that need to be reviewed so that everyone is paying their equitable share and paying the correct price, that ultimately we don't inflate costs in services that are being provided to Eskom, and that we also deal with the broader population about how we manage energy and make sure that as a nation we are not we are reasonable and working energy properly. And bulk energy producers, as one of the suggestions that we're putting forward, is to say let's also build, own, operate models where a bulk energy user such as a mine is able to build its own sub kind of station, provide its own energy, and ensure that we can reduce demand, allowing excess energy to be used in other areas, particularly for consumers.
Now, earlier we were both saying that nobody disagrees that these proposed increases are untenable and unaffordable. But also, let's talk about the role of Nersa that has actually proposed these increases as well. What role do they play and how do they justify this kind of increase at this time in our economy?
Yeah, I think that we should all take cognizance of what is going on at Nersa and their engagement in much litigation, etc. It is an entity that we need to hold to much better scrutiny, because at this point in time, whilst Nersa can, empowered by law, operate in a manner that is independent, but I think it needs to take cognizance of further economic consequences of the actions it takes, because as an energy regulator, being able to give such concessions to Eskom in how it works almost legitimizes in certain instances what Eskom is at and where some of the mismanagement was at. The triple challenge at Eskom was always about generating energy, but the second most crucial one was stabilizing its finances. And if Nersa is not cognizant of that fact, consumers will continue to be double taxed. And I think that we need to have a thorough evaluation of what is going on at Nersa and take into account the broader economic issues. Today, we've just been given a rate relief by the Reserve Bank, which will mean that for citizens, there's a little bit of money flow coming in back into the economy. But that is not anything that we should just rest on. We should just now ensure that what Nersa also grants doesn't eat away on that through inflationary pressures that it is asking consumers to pay for. So to me, I think as a society, we need to thoroughly engage with what is going on at Nersa. I certainly don't agree with the grants that it has been issuing Eskom.
Mr. Mmusi Maimane, thank you so much for your time this evening. That's Build One South Africa leader Mmusi Maimane.